Cheers, guys. Epyx911, welcome to
Gaming Friday. Now it is Gaming Friday this week, guys. It's not Filming Friday. Why is it not Filming Friday? Because episode 1 of Timeless Gamers has been in editing for a week. But honestly, the man's been really busy. I understand this. And so I'm going to be learning the editing process tonight. And so video coming really, really soon. In the meantime, news time.
News time indeed, guys. Let's start with a virtual band that I knew, honestly, absolutely nothing about prior to today. The band Gorillaz, which apparently Exidy you've heard of.
I love them. Love them.
And apparently these guys have been around since 1998, which I also wasn't aware of. Did you know that?
Of course.
It's okay. Well, yeah, I didn't. But there you have it. The band is Gorillaz, and they have a latest album, apparently their 5th, and a song which is available in 360 degrees on all the mobile solutions, so your Gear VR, your Daydream, and PC Rift and Vive. No word on PlayStation VR. I've seen a couple of cases where they kind of hint that it might work, but nothing definitive. They certainly don't list it as official. Now, the video that they have out has a song on it. It's called Saturn's Bars, and I didn't mind it. I mean, I'd have to listen to a lot more of the music to determine if it's something I would enjoy, but I liked the video in terms of its presentation. Really trippy, really cool effects, and I could definitely see a bit of a rebirth for music videos under 360 degrees. It puts you back in touch with the music and the medium of videos, right? Something we, let's just face it, haven't had since the 1990s, because this new century has really not had anything to do with music videos. They still make them. You can see it on YouTube and a couple, but they're not official, and they certainly aren't as popular as they were. Well, maybe with 360, some of that's going to come back. Under no illusion, they're going to be anywhere near as popular as they were, but this might just give them a boost back into, at least relevancy from complete obscurity. All right, the perfect VR locomotion solution. Well, according to Oculus, that is still years away. UploadVR had an interview with executive producer at Oculus, David Yee. And in a recent interview, he said, look, we don't understand how the brain works in terms of what's comfortable or how people are acclimatizing. The industry will decide what the standard is and not Oculus itself. So in other words, he's pushing it into the hands of the indie and AAA devs to determine. Now, what we have seen is a lot of experimentation. I can think of easily a dozen variations of both teleportation and smooth motion, locomotion. And they all have their benefits and they all have their, negatives. What I hope we're going to see is maybe not official, locomotions that are going to become the standard, but at least a group of core locomotion options that are going to be accepted kind of as the norm. And, I hope developers continue to be innovative, because just because something feels comfortable now doesn't mean that there's not potentially something better, right? Now, obviously, the risk of that is you're constantly in limbo, constantly experimenting, and you never have a standard. So I don't hope for that extreme, but I would like to see experimentation continue so we can at least get closer to that kind of ideal, right? Which is free form, being able to manipulate the world around us in VR and have it feel natural and not in a way that makes you want to hurl. All right, I like this story, guys. This has to do with the Nintendo Switch and a designer, Antoine Beynel. He drafted up some mock-ups of how he envisioned virtual reality working with the Nintendo Switch. And it's pretty cool. It looks realistic. It looks as if it's an actual product, which is neat. And it essentially would be powered. I mean, it's a Tegra that they're that's powering the Switch. So essentially you would get something probably a little bit more powerful even than the Qualcomm units that are out. I mean, it is a decent GPU. I still don't consider it desktop quality, but it's a pretty beefy for what it does. Certainly faster than your average mobile phone GPU. So unfortunately, right now, this is absolute pure fantasy, but maybe, just maybe, at some point, and I think they've still got some taint of virtual Nintendo left in their collective tastes, but hopefully we see something similar to this at some point in the future. Next up, Rift Year One. Another cool story. This fella, his name is Ross Martin. He was the first person to pre-order an Oculus Rift. So Palmer Luckey hopped on a plane, I think with his girlfriend or somebody from the company, and hand-delivered the unit to Ross. Now, Ross was waiting for this. I believe he's got a company in Alaska, and he was waiting in the company's office. It was a Saturday. There was nobody else in the office. He couldn't test the unit, but he was able to do a quick photo op with Palmer, do the unboxing there, and then mention to him that he was going to play the next day. Well, you never heard from the guy again until now. So they've checked in with him pretty much a year to the day, well, next week anyways, and asked Ross if he was still into virtual reality, and if so, you know, what are the parts he likes and the parts that maybe didn't interest him so much. Well, the truth is he did stop playing virtual reality before the touch controllers launched. Then when the touch controllers launched, it was kind of a bit of a rebirth, you know, rekindled his interest, and according to him, he's maintained that since. He also talked about the quality of the Oculus Rift games, how that's changed over the course of the first year, and didn't mind getting into a bit of controversy with the whole, you know, legal debacle and all of that stuff, and the openness with customers, the transparency that he actually talked about in the first video. So he didn't shy away from that. He addressed it. So it was neat to check in with him a year later. And you got to wonder, I mean, it asks that question. How many of us still are into virtual reality? I mean, look, there's a few of you on my Steam, and I see you guys play other games, not just virtual reality games. I can say for myself, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I just don't have a hell of a lot of free time, it's still 90% virtual reality, about 10% arcade. Well, no, 80% VR, 10% arcade, 10% 3DS, if I'm being completely honest. Right there, 3DS. So, yeah, my gaming has still predominantly been VR. What about you guys? How do you find your split now versus, you know, the first 6 months maybe with VR? And at what point did it kind of wane for you and you started playing 2D more? Or, like me, are you still mostly VR? Love to hear from you guys. It really got me thinking about that. Just percentage-wise, how do things look? Because most of you, or many of you, like me, were early adopters. All right, next story. Truescale making a compelling case for interior design with virtual reality. Now, I've talked in the past, we talked about the architectural boon and potential for virtual reality. We've also talked about the ability to list your house, real estate agents, how they can interface with virtual reality to sell places. Being able to walk around a home in 360 degree does a lot more than looking at static two-dimensional pictures, right, of a 3D object. Well, what about actual design? So really, even prior to architecture, drafting places, living spaces. Well, that's where Truescale comes in, and it's going to be available Viveport and Steam with full Vive support. And according to the article, it's a compelling mix of interior design and a little bit of Electronic Arts' The Sims. So what you can do in this is you can add components to your living space, almost like a train set, you know, where you're adding rails. So it's very block orientated in terms of building, And then you can shrink yourself down or up. So you've got that sense of scale of being the designer, stepping back 10,000 foot level, and then zooming right in to actually occupy the living space to scale. That's pretty powerful. And I think that, again, like, for the real estate agency, that could provide some really cool functionality for those people who design buildings, layouts, etc. And the last story, guys, 5 companies, we've touched on a couple the last few days, that hope to cut the cord to your high-end virtual reality HMDs. Few of these we've seen, one actually able to be tested. I believe it was the Quick VR. I've been trying to substantiate that, and I know I did the video around it. Can't remember if it was CES or another event, but it had a lot of latency, and I believe that was the Quick VR unit, but I will confirm that. But there's a few units here I hadn't heard of. IMR, that's from Immersive Robotics, and it relies on a very aggressive algorithm to supposedly deliver very smooth video compression over standard Wi-Fi technology. Now, personally, that's where I'm a little skeptical. I'd like to see that in action. I'd like to hear from somebody who's actually tested it. My initial reaction is that it would be much like if it was the Quick VR, whatever the unit was that was tested, that it's also going to suffer from latency. Aggressive compression or no, over standard Wi-Fi, that's a really tall order. 60 gigahertz makes sense to me. 2.4 and 5, not so much. It's almost the same thing with NG codec. They are using 5 gigahertz, 2.4, and 60, and they're touting the non-line of sight as an advantage, right? Personally, I don't see the requirement of line of sight as a disadvantage necessarily. They keep mentioning out-of-room play. For me personally, and the group that I play with, I don't see that as being a requirement. I see us all in the same room, occupying the same space. Not to say that there aren't other opportunities for that, but I think you could do without them and still be every bit as productive and have every bit as useful a Wi-Fi solution, right? An untethered solution with something running line of sight. And then the other one that they mention here is Nitero. This is another one I haven't heard of. And unlike the other units, they are designing for the next generation of HMDs. So not the current slate, but maybe that, 4K and beyond. So there's no specs really, not even visuals that I was able to find on these other than the company logo. And then lastly, to round out the 5, Quark VR. Now, very similar to Immersive Robotics, they are also using a compression algorithm. That's kind of the ace up their sleeve. Again, yes, call me a skeptic. I just want evidence. I just want to see or hear it in action and get an accounting of the latency, because I'm not completely convinced compression alone over standard Wi-Fi is going to do it. But I'd love to be proven wrong. All right, guys, that is it for the news on this Game and Friday. Time for some actual gaming and show Exidy how to do some editing. As always, guys, cheers.